Have you ever wondered why you keep holding on to someone who doesn't hesitate to leave you for last, as if your presence were disposable, as if your love were a nuisance? There's a silent pain that almost no one sees. The emptiness of not being chosen by the person you choose every day. It's a kind of abandonment that doesn't scream, but corrodes from within. You stay there, always available, always trying to be enough, always trying to be seen, hoping that one day, by some miracle, he'll realize how much you're worth. But that day never comes, and deep down, you already know it. Emotional routine becomes an internal battle between what you feel and what he shows. And in this invisible war, you lose yourself. Because while you wait for messages that never arrive, justifications that are never given, and attitudes that never change, you slowly suffocate your own voice, your own worth, your own limits. And you begin to confuse persistence with loyalty, when in reality, you're just feeding a hope that keeps you chained to a love that doesn't truly exist. It's at this point that many people deceive themselves into thinking they're in a relationship, when in reality they're surviving within an absence disguised as presence. You may be with someone, but they're not really with you. They're with their phone, their friends, their own dilemmas, everything except you. And yet you persist, as if every small attention were a sign of change, as if every return after a disappearance were a turning point, as if every vague phrase were a veiled promise. But it's not. You no longer need answers. You already have them all. The problem is that you're trying to convince your heart to accept what your mind already understood long ago. And that hurts, because admitting you're not chosen is like giving up on a dream you built alone. But what if I told you that this is exactly where your liberation begins? The moment you stop begging for space and start taking your own place. The moment you realize that loving someone shouldn't cost you your dignity. That being lovable doesn't mean accepting crumbs. That love without reciprocity is neediness, and insistence without return is disrespect, disguised as courage. This video isn't just another rant about disappointment, it's a call to conscience, a break from the vicious cycle of trying to fit into a space where you've never truly been welcome. Here, you won't hear prepackaged phrases or superficial advice. What you'll find is a mirror, and perhaps the most sincere reflection of everything you've been trying to ignore for too long, because there comes a time when insisting becomes an act against yourself. And perhaps you've already passed that point without realizing it. That's what we'll talk about from now on. And you can be sure, if you stick around until the end, you won't leave this video with the same perspective you had when you entered. The void of no choice, when absence says it all. Being by someone's side and still feeling alone is one of the most devastating experiences for the heart of a woman who loves intensely. It's the kind of loneliness that doesn't require silence, because it manifests itself even in the middle of a conversation, in the middle of a shared bed, in the middle of a relationship that, to others, still seems whole. But you know, you feel, you perceive. He doesn't choose you. He's there, but his gaze doesn't reach you. His words are shallow, his gestures are automatic, and his presence is merely physical. And in this kind of emptiness, what hurts most isn't what he does, but what he doesn't do. It's not the shouting, it's the indifference. It's not the explicit rejection, it's the constant absence of demonstration. You don't need him to tell you he doesn't love you, because his silence speaks louder than any words. He doesn't plan anything with you. He doesn't include you in decisions. He doesn't really ask how you are, and yet you remain there, trying to fill the spaces he leaves empty, as if loving were enough to sustain something that should be between two people. The truth is, when someone wants to be there, they are. When someone sees value, they show it. When someone chooses, they don't hesitate. And if you live in doubt, it's because you already have your answer, but your heart tries to postpone the inevitable. You interpret every gesture as a possible sign of improvement. You ignore the discomfort, pretend not to notice the coldness, justify his disappearances with excuses he never gave you, because it's less painful to believe he's confused than to accept that he simply doesn't want you the same way. But every repeated absence becomes a warning, and your body feels it. You start to question yourself, compare yourself, blame yourself. The once light love turns into constant tension. You walk on eggshells, temper your words, recalculate every action to try not to further push someone who's already far away. With each new day, you hope he'll choose you. And with each new disappointment, you convince yourself that you need to try harder, give in more, endure more. But if loving someone requires you to deny yourself, then that's not love. It's self-abandonment. Because loving shouldn't hurt like this. It shouldn't put you on hold, nor force you to swallow your pride, nor make you doubt your own light. When someone truly chooses you, you feel it. It's simple. It's clear. It's present. The lack of choice hurts because it disguises itself as routine, and you get used to little because you believe it's the most you can receive. But the great turning point begins when you recognize this emptiness not as a punishment, but as a warning. A sign that you need to choose yourself before your love for them consumes what little remains of your love. Constant absence is a response, and it's time to stop pretending you don't understand. The emotional programming that makes you settle for crumbs. No one wakes up one day and decides to settle for less. This happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, like a silent emotional reprogramming built over years. What you call patience or strength to love may actually be the result of past experiences that taught you, without words, that loving is enduring, that true love requires pain, that being chosen is a luxury reserved for other women, not for you. This belief isn't born from your current relationship. It was planted long before. Perhaps when you were a child and learned that, to be noticed, you had to please. Or when you understood that your value depended on how useful you could be to others. Perhaps you lived with absent, emotionally cold adults who only showed affection when you did everything right. And without realizing it, you brought this logic into your love life. You created a distorted idea that love is earned through effort, sacrifice, and persistence, as if you needed to constantly prove that you deserve to be chosen. It's this kind of programming that makes you stay where there's no reciprocity, that traps you in unbalanced relationships as if loving too much were a virtue, when in reality it's an emotional trap. You get used to not being a priority, to normalizing lame excuses, to expecting attention as if it were a reward, to living off small emotional crumbs that, deep down, only fuel the illusion that if you keep giving, he'll notice. But he doesn't. Because you're teaching him, with each new attempt, that he can be neglected without consequences. And this is a harsh truth. What you repeatedly accept becomes the relationship's default. And each time you silence your pain to keep someone close, you're reaffirming that your presence is worth less than the fear of loneliness. But the price is too high. You begin to adapt to absence as if it were normal, and what was once uncomfortable becomes an emotional routine. The cruelest thing about this dynamic is that it's invisible. In the eyes of others, everything is fine. You smile, post photos, say everything's fine. But deep down, you know it's not. And this internal conflict drains you, because your mind screams that you deserve more, while your heart still believes it can change. That maybe, with a little more time, everything will fall into place. But it's not time that heals this kind of emptiness. It's awareness. The clarity that the problem isn't how much you love, but how much you lose yourself in that love, how much you accept less, desperately hoping that one day it will become more. But it doesn't, Because those who only offer you crumbs have already shown you, in practice, what place they reserve for you in their life. And as long as you continue to accept that place, you won't discover the space you truly deserve. Reprogramming begins when you understand that you don't need to prove anything to be chosen, when you recognize that true love doesn't ask for inhuman effort. It welcomes you, sees you, values you, without you having to sacrifice yourself to fit in. And this is only possible when you stop accepting crumbs and start rebuilding your own emotional narrative. Because the love you seek outside will only appear when you stop abandoning yourself inside. Self-abandonment disguised as unconditional love. There's a point in a relationship where the line between loving someone and abandoning yourself stops being tenuous and becomes explicit. The problem is that when you're in this situation, you rarely notice it. Your mind is busy creating justifications, your heart continues to cling to memories, and hope acts as an emotional anesthetic. You believe you're being faithful to love, when in fact, you're betraying yourself. Unconditional love doesn't mean accepting everything. It doesn't mean remaining silent in the face of indifference, nor does it mean passively waiting for changes that never come. True love isn't about giving yourself up until there's nothing left of you, and yet many women confuse emotional resistance with proof of love. They stay out of fear of loss. They fight for someone who never fought for them. And they harbor the mistaken idea that persisting until the end is a virtue, when in reality it's desperation disguised as loyalty. The truth is, you can love someone deeply and still understand that this love isn't enough to sustain a relationship. You may want it to work, dream of a different version of reality, long to be chosen every day. But if the other person doesn't share that same desire, that same effort, that same dedication, there's no real connection, only attachment. And attachment is treacherous. It convinces you that there's no life outside that relationship. It distorts your perception of worth. It makes you see every small gesture as a reward. It makes you accept humiliations disguised as difficult moments. And that's exactly where self-abandonment begins, when you stop listening to yourself, when you ignore the constant nagging, when you silence your intuition to stay by someone's side who's only there when it suits them. This kind of love hurts more than total absence, because it carries the illusion that there's still something to save. You cling to the idea of what could be, of what you could have, of what you could fix. And in this process, you lose track of how much you've already lost. You mold yourself, shrink, and annul yourself. You stop saying what you think. You hide what you feel. You stifle your own needs so as not to push away someone who is no longer truly there. Love that demands silence is not love. Love that demands constant resistance is not love. Love that depends exclusively on your effort is, at best, emotional survival. And no one was made to live begging for presence, begging for attention, or constantly reinventing themselves to be noticed. True love doesn't require proof. It manifests itself in consistency, in care, in priority. It doesn't test you. It embraces you. It doesn't push you to the bottom. It propels you upward. And if what you're experiencing doesn't elevate you, doesn't nourish you, or doesn't heal you, then perhaps it's time to accept that this isn't love. It's self-abandonment, disguised as devotion. The decision to remain in this place is never neutral. It communicates something to the world, but most importantly to yourself. Every time you stay where there's no reciprocity, you're telling your heart that it doesn't matter that much. And over time, it believes it. But you can still reverse this process. You can still choose to step out of the role of someone who always forgives, always waits, always tries. You can still come back to yourself. And when that happens, you will no longer accept any kind of love. You will immediately recognize everything that no longer fits into your life. When love is letting go, the choice that liberates. There comes a time when the truest love isn't the one that insists, but the one that lets go. It's not the one that waits, but the one that allows itself to leave. Love is also knowing when to walk away, not for lack of feelings, but for an excess of self-respect. There are relationships that don't end with fights, but with silence. They don't end with words, but with the weight of emotional absence. And in that moment, letting go isn't giving up on love. It's choosing, finally, to love yourself. You've spent too much time trying to understand why he doesn't choose you, why he doesn't change, why he doesn't show it, why he doesn't see you. But the question that really matters is, why do you keep insisting? What still keeps you tied to this place where love has become waiting, where attention has become a reward, where your presence has ceased to have an impact? The answer may be difficult, but it needs to be said. You stay because you still believe you're worth less than you deserve. And that needs to end now. Letting go isn't weakness, it's emotional maturity. It's the courage to break the cycle. It's understanding that insisting on love when there's no reciprocity is like watering a rock garden expecting flowers. You give your all, but nothing blooms. Not because of your fault, but because the other person's soil was never prepared to receive you. And you need to stop molding yourself into spaces where your love is misinterpreted, underestimated, or discarded. The decision to stop insisting is often the hardest, because it requires you to face the pain head-on, without anesthesia. It requires you to dismantle dreams, revise promises, silence hopes. But it's also this decision that restores your peace, that clears the emotional field so that something new, more just, lighter, truer can emerge. When you choose to let go of what holds you back, you make room for what sets you free. The choice that liberates is the one that places you at the center of your own story, that gives you back emotional control, that allows you to walk without dragging chains, and that, above all, shows you that love begins within you. It begins when you stop diminishing yourself to fit into someone else's life, when you stop accepting emotional leftovers, when you understand that presence without intention is absence in disguise. You weren't made to be a means, not a plan B, not a draft. You were made to be a choice, to be a felt presence, not tolerated, to be a priority, not a convenience. And the only way to experience love like this is to accept nothing less. Liberation isn't in someone else choosing you. It's in you no longer accepting being ignored. And if loving hurts today, then perhaps loving is precisely what needs to be stopped, because true love doesn't hurt like that. It heals, it adds, it builds. And if all you've felt is loss, exhaustion, and loneliness, then it's not love, it's attachment, it's fear, it's need. The choice that liberates begins with one step, recognizing that staying no longer makes sense. And taking that step is an act of courage few people possess. But you can have it, because the woman you are now no longer fits into the story you're trying to keep alive. And perhaps that's exactly what you needed to hear to finally rewrite your life. The pain of not being chosen doesn't come solely from the other person's absence. It arises, above all, from the moment you stop choosing yourself, when you give up your own limits, your own dreams, your own voice, all to keep someone who's only there when it's convenient. And deep down, you know, all this effort should never have been necessary. The insistence you call love has passed the point of healthy surrender and entered the realm of renunciation. Renunciation of your peace, your joy, your dignity. You remained out of fear, out of hope, out of attachment. But not out of reciprocity, because if there were reciprocity, there would be no doubt. True love doesn't hide, it reveals itself, it remains, it chooses. Today, perhaps you're experiencing an internal war between what you feel and what you know, between the desire to be loved and the pain of not being seen, and that's precisely where the key turns. Because understanding that you deserve more is the beginning of reconstruction. Not the kind of woman who insists, waits, and suffers in silence, but the kind of woman who looks in the mirror and recognizes her worth, who learns to listen to herself before listening to empty promises, who makes herself a priority in her own life. The moral of this story isn't about learning to love less, but about learning to love better, starting with you. True love doesn't require constant effort to prove its place. It isn't sustained by excuses, nor does it feed on silence. The love that's worthwhile is the kind that doesn't demand you diminish yourself to fit in, that doesn't ask you to accept less than you deserve. And if you're here today, it's because something inside you already knows it's over. That insisting is keeping a story that's making you sick. That continuing is pushing yourself further away from yourself. So maybe it's time to stop, take a deep breath, and make the choice you've always hoped someone would make for you, to choose you. From here on, the decision is yours. You can continue clinging to the hope that hurts, or you can take the first step toward the freedom that heals, because there's no greater reward than feeling whole again. And this path begins when you decide, once and for all, to stop insisting where you were never truly chosen. Thank you for watching this video. We ask that you subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, turn on the notification bell to be notified of our posts. See you in the next Vide.